Welcome to the Wellbeing Podcast, where every episode is a step towards a healthier, happier you. Let's grow, thrive, and shine together. Today,
Don't get
we're taking a deep dive into something pretty fascinating, how different generations find their purpose in life. You've given us some great material to work with, including this episode of Generations Unplugged.
It's a question that's been pondered for ages, hasn't it?
Right.
What gives our lives meaning? And it seems each generation tackles this in their own unique way, shaped by the world they inherit.
Absolutely. Generations Unplugged really highlights how those big historical moments, those collective experiences almost imprint a generation with a particular outlook on purpose. It makes you wonder, what will future generations say about our search for meaning? But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's start with the greatest generation, those born between 1901 and 1927. They faced the Great Depression and World War II. Talk about trial by fire.
It's almost unimaginable, isn't it? Facing such hardship at such a young age. It's no wonder that for them, purpose was often found in sacrifice, in serving their community, in banding together to overcome incredible challenges. A 2015 Pew Research study found that a full 75% of this generation saw hard work and duty as the keys to a meaningful life.
It makes sense, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When survival is at stake, you find purpose in pulling together and contributing to the collective good. But then we move into the post-war boom, and with the baby boomers born between 1946 and 1964, we see a shift. Suddenly there's space for personal ambition, for self-discovery. Think about the cultural touchstones, rock and roll of the civil rights movement, this explosion of self-expression.
Exactly. For this generation, raised in relative peace and prosperity, purpose became more individualistic. It was about climbing the career ladder, expressing your unique self, and yes, finding yourself. That very phrase feels like a quintessential boomer invention.
And it seems they're still all about staying active and engaged. A 2020 AARP study found 68% of boomers believe that pursuing passions is key to a meaningful life. But as they age, there's another layer emerging, isn't there? It's less about personal achievement and more about leaving a legacy.
There's a real desire to mentor, to give back to their communities, to solidify their impact on the world. It's almost as if their definition of purpose is evolving along with their life stage.
Which makes me think, is purpose ever truly static? Or is it something that constantly shifts and adapts as we do? But let's move on to Generation X, born between these two larger generations. They're often called the forgotten generation, but they have a distinct way of approaching purpose, don't they?
Absolutely. Gen X grew up with a different kind of uncertainty, economic instability, shifting family structures. It was a time of rapid change, and that shaped their values. They prized balance, independence, and authenticity, perhaps because they had to be so adaptable and self-reliant.
That resilience shines through in how they define purpose, too. A 2019 Deloitte survey found that 60% of Gen Xers see it as being true to themselves and living a balanced life. It's less about external validation and more about finding fulfillment on their own terms.
It's a fascinating contrast to the boomer emphasis on achievement. Gen X is saying success isn't about climbing a predefined ladder, it's about defining your own path and finding satisfaction in the everyday.
Which brings us to the generation everyone loves to talk about, Millennials born between 1981 and 1996. Now, things get really interesting because they've come of age in a world vastly different from the ones their parents and grandparents knew.
They witnessed the 2008 financial crisis, the rise of social media, the accelerating impacts of climate change. It's no wonder that for them, purpose is often deeply intertwined with making a tangible impact on the world.
And it's not just lip service, is it? This generation actually puts their values into action. A 2021 Gallup poll found that a whopping 70% of millennials prioritize purpose over a bigger paycheck when choosing a job. It's about aligning their work with their beliefs, which is pretty amazing to see.
And that desire for meaningful experiences extends beyond the workplace. They're passionate about travel, volunteering, personal growth, all things that enrich their lives and contribute to a sense of purpose. They're collectors of experiences, not necessarily things.
That's such a great point. It's not about acquiring material wealth. It's about broadening their horizons and making a difference. But of course, it's not all sunshine and roses. This generation also faces significant challenges, don't they?
Absolutely. Student loan debt, a volatile job market, the constant pressure to achieve it all while looking effortlessly perfect on social media. It's a lot to juggle.
It makes you wonder, how do they navigate these obstacles while still staying true to their values? And speaking of navigating a complex world, that brings us to Generation Z, born between 1997 and 2012.
The digital natives, the activists, the ones who seem to be challenging norms left and right. Their approach to purpose is deeply intertwined with authenticity, activism, and connection. They're hyper-aware of global issues like climate change and social justice, and they're not afraid to speak up.
They're the generation that grew up with social media as a megaphone, right?
Right.
A 2022 McKinsey report found that 60% of Gen Zers believe their purpose is to make the world a better place. It's almost like they see it as their responsibility to drive change.
And that's incredibly inspiring, but it also comes with its own set of pressures. The constant curation of online personas, the fear of missing out, the sheer volume of information and opinions bombarding them constantly. It's a lot to navigate when trying to forge your own authentic path.
It really highlights the unique challenges each generation faces in finding their place and purpose in the world.
It makes you wonder, with all these pressures and influences swirling around them, how will they define success? Will it be about external validation or about staying true to their values in a world that's constantly trying to pull them in different directions?
It's a question that really gets to the heart of this whole idea of purpose, doesn't it? What happens when the traditional markers of success, the stable career, the house with the white picket fence, maybe don't resonate with an entire generation?
And speaking of shifting paradigms, we can't forget the youngest generation on the scene, Generation Alpha, born after 2012. It's still early days, but they're already giving us glimpses into how they might approach purpose, and it's fascinating.
They're the ones who will never know a world without smartphones, social media, or artificial intelligence. It's like they're being raised in a science fiction novel come to life. A 2023 study by McCrindle Research found that 80% of these kids are already using technology to learn, create, and problem solve.
They're not just passive consumers of technology, they're active participants, collaborators, creators. Imagine the possibilities. What happens when a generation grows up with the tools to build and innovate at their fingertips?
It's mind-boggling to think about the kind of impact they could have on the world. But before we get lost in speculation about the future, let's bring it back to the present. We've explored how each generation approaches purpose, but Generations Unplugged also touches on something really important: finding common ground despite these differences.
It's easy to focus on the things that divide us, but at the end of the day, purpose is ultimately about connection. Connection to ourselves, to our communities, to something larger than ourselves. And that's something that transcends generational boundaries.
So how do we bridge those gaps? The podcast suggests that it starts with something pretty simple: listening. Really listening to understand how different generations define purpose and why. It's about stepping outside our own generational bubbles and trying to see the world through someone else's eyes.
Empathy is key, isn't it? It's so easy to dismiss another generation's values or priorities if we don't take the time to understand the context, the experiences that shaped their worldview.
And beyond listening, there's the power of sharing stories. Each generation has its own unique set of experiences, challenges, triumphs. By sharing those stories, we can learn from each other, find inspiration, and build a sense of shared understanding.
It's like weaving together a tapestry of different perspectives, a richer and more nuanced picture of what it means to live a purposeful life. And then, of course, there's collaboration.
Right. Working together on projects that align with our shared values, whether it's community service, environmental activism, or mentoring the next generation. A 2020 Harvard study found that intergenerational collaboration actually leads to greater innovation and a stronger sense of community.
It's a win-win. We learn from each other, we tackle complex challenges together, and we build a more vibrant, interconnected society in the process.
It's almost like each generation holds a piece of the puzzle, and it's only by coming together that we could see the complete picture.
But what does this mean for you, our listener? How can you apply these insights to your own life, your own search for purpose?
Well, first, I think it's a reminder that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to purpose. What resonates with a baby boomer might not light a fire under a Gen Z, and that's okay. The key is to understand the forces that have shaped your generation, but also to recognize that you're not bound by them.
It's about taking ownership of your own values, passions, and experiences. What makes you tick? What kind of impact do you want to have on the world? Don't be afraid to break free from those generational stereotypes.
You can be a millennial who prioritizes financial security, a Gen Xer who's passionate about social justice, a baby boomer who's embracing the digital world. There's so much diversity within each generation. These labels are just starting points, not endpoints.
And I think that's one of the most exciting things about exploring this topic. It pushes us to challenge our assumptions, to see beyond the stereotypes and recognize the richness that comes from interacting with people from different walks of life, different generations.
Here's where it gets really interesting. By connecting with people from other generations, we can broaden our perspectives, discover new passions, and maybe even find solutions to problems we never could have imagined on our own.
Imagine the possibilities. A younger person might introduce you to a new technology or way of thinking, while someone older might share their wisdom and experience helping you navigate life's complexities. It's a reciprocal relationship, a two-way street where everyone benefits.
And it's not just about personal growth. Intergenerational collaboration can have a huge impact on our communities and the world at large. Think about it. Harnessing the energy and idealism of youth, the experience and wisdom of older generations all working together towards a common goal. That's a force to be reckoned with. So whether it's volunteering at a local charity working on a community project or simply having more conversations with people outside your age group, there are countless ways to bridge that generational divide and build a more purpose-driven world together.
And remember, it's never too late to start. No matter your age, you have something valuable to contribute, a unique perspective to share, and a role to play in shaping the future.
I love that. It's so empowering to think about. As we wrap up this deep dive, Generations Unplugged, let me with this lingering question. With the world changing so rapidly, how do you think the very concept of purpose will continue to evolve for future generations?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? If we look at the trends, we're already seeing a shift towards more fluid, personalized definitions of success and purpose. The traditional career path is becoming less relevant for many. With more people embracing entrepreneurship, freelancing, the gig economy, it's about creating a life that aligns with your values, not necessarily fitting into a predefined box.
And technology is playing a huge role in that shift. It's giving people more options, more flexibility, more opportunities to create their own paths.
Absolutely. And as technology continues to evolve at an exponential rate, who knows what new possibilities will emerge? We might see a rise in purpose-driven startups using technology to address social and environmental challenges. Maybe virtual reality will allow people to experience different careers and lifestyles before committing to one.
It's exciting and a little bit daunting to think about all the possibilities.
It is. But amidst all this change, one thing remains constant. That fundamental human need to find meaning and purpose. It's something that will continue to drive us, challenge us, and inspire us no matter what the future holds.
It's a journey we're all on together, each generation adding its own chapter to the story of human purpose. Big thanks to Generations Unplugged for giving us so much food for thought. And to you, our listener, we hope this deep dive has sparked some new ideas and insights about your own unique path.
Keep asking those big questions, keep exploring, keep connecting, and most importantly, keep living a life that feels meaningful to you.
Beautifully said. Thanks for listening to the Wellbeing Podcast. Take care, stay inspired, and see you next time.